Hello and welcome to another This Week's in Politics, on part of the J Politics Blog Podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. You can reach us at podcast99.org, or you can reach me directly at jpoliticspodcast@gmail.com or at jpolypodcast on Twitter. And so today I was thinking that we were going to hopefully have a nice short session on here, a short video. But it might go a little longer because I wasn't planning on the some of the events that happened, such as Jay Inslee, the governor here in Washington, vetoing a bill that he clearly could be overridden on, but I think it was the right move for him. And also going to talk about video games, specifically gambling in video games, such as Star Wars Battlefront 2 and other videos or other video games that use what's called loot boxes. Now, to start with, we're going to start with the Jay Inslee story about the vetoing. Now, I was originally going to share from the Olympian, which was on Tuesday, February 27th. The public records. It's a large editorial piece, actually, that was done not just by local papers here in Olympian and whatnot, but all over the state. And to make a long story short, of course, the editorials are going to oppose this bill because it makes it harder for them to do their job. And who wants their job made harder by people who they're trying to work with? So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and go over to the most recent article, which was shared. I want to say it was today's paper, but since I couldn't buy one today, I decided to just go with the online version. Let me make sure it's on there. All right, let's make sure it's pulled up here so I can actually do this. There we go. The one thing you learn about doing Google Hangouts on Air Live is that you got to make sure your windows are up, not just minimized. So the title of the story here is Inslee vetoes controversial legislative public records bill. It was originally written on March 1st, updated on March 2nd, and published in today's paper. This is where I saw it. Today's paper. A bill exempting Washington's legislature from Voter-Approved Public Records Act circumventing an open government court ruling was sent to Governor Jay Inslee's desk last week at breakneck speed. On Thursday, it screeched to a halt when Inslee voted Senate Bill 6617 among growing outcry from residents who said it shuttered public information, and calls from a swath of lawmakers who said their sprint to pass the bill in roughly 48 hours was a mistake. Inslee, in a statement emailed to reporters Thursday night, said the public's right to government information is one we hold dearly in Washington. Transparency is a cornerstone of the Democratic government, and I'm very proud of my administration's record on public disclosure, he continued. All right, let's see here. Where was it? Oh, yeah. And I believe legislators will find that they can fulfill their duties while being fully transparent, just like state and local governments all across Washington. All right, breakneck speed there, just like the lawmakers. Excuse me. Lawmakers pledged not to override the governor's veto and to convene a task force to hammer out recommendations on an open records reform at the legislature in 2019. The committee will be made up of legislators, open government advocates, representatives from the news media, and other state officials. Legislatures, quote, made a mistake by failing to go through a full public hearing process on this very important legislation, end quote, according to letters signed by 41 House Democrats and 16 Senate Democrats and delivered to Inslee on Thursday. Senate Bill 6617 was written after a coalition of media organizations led by the Associated Press, including the News Tribune, sued the legislature over a year-long practice of denying disclosure records such as emails, daily calendars, and personnel investigation. I'm going to take a quick break here and just kind of sum this all up. Like I said before last week, the bill is aimed at denying us, the people, the knowledge of what they do in their daily work. Some of it, yes, is private. It's not meant to be public discourse. One such thing is, do I need to know on their personal calendar when their doctor's appointments are and where their doctor's appointments are at and with who and etc.? No, I do not need to know that, nor do you. But if they are having a meeting with, say, a lobbyist of anything, the Environmental Protection Agency, advocates, um, NRA, Weyerhaeuser, Boeing, etc., it doesn't matter. We should be able to know what it was, maybe not down to the minutest detail what they discussed, but we should have an idea of what that meeting was about. That's my opinion on it. I don't know about anybody else's, but I think that, you know, you and I as citizens, we should be able to see and understand that. Okay. Now, the senators and the House of Representatives here in Washington may disagree with us on that. However, we vote them in, we can vote them out. Lawmakers are getting to the point where they're thinking that they don't need to rely on us, the average American, the average voter. What we need to do is in the next voting cycles, show them that they're wrong in that. And, take a look at how your representatives voted on this bill. And if they voted in a way that doesn't please you, consider not voting for them again. Vote for their opponent if they have one. Write a name in, if there's a spot to write a name in, write a name in. If you meet the qualifications for running for office, write your own name in. Anything to detract from them, especially if they are running unopposed. If they're running unopposed, usually, in most instances I've seen, they have a spot for a write-in. Not always, but usually in these partisan politics areas, they do. Going on. Lawmakers have claimed an exemption from the disclosure they believe exists in state law. On January 19th, Thurston County Superior Court Judge Chris Lindsay, cannot even pronounce names. Think I'd have spent a week practicing that. Disagreed, saying that individual legislatures have always been subject to the Public Records Act. That ruling prompted lawmakers to move forward last week in their attempt to exempt themselves from the Public Records Act. The bill passed both chambers of the legislature with enough votes to override an Inslee veto had the lawmakers chosen to do so. Leaders of the news media organizations and their attorney, Michelle Earl Hubbard, agreed to concessions to help secure Inslee's veto. The coalition agreed not to seek enforcement of the judge's ruling, while the legislature tries to appeal it to the state Supreme Court. The group also agreed to join the legislature in seeking a stay of Thurston County court proceedings and said it would not launch an initiative or referendum to change the current law. Senate Bill 6617 would have required legislatures to release some records, such as work calendars, final disciplinary reports, and emails between them and registered lobbyists, but would have shielded many others. Correspondence with constituents would have been exempt from this disclosure. Many lawmakers argued private information can sometimes be in those emails and should not end up in the hands of the general public. Let's stop right there again. And this time I'm actually going to take it off the article here for a minute. Now, here's the thing. I agree that there are things that, like, if I send my personal email, I don't want people to be able to dox me, especially from getting information about whatever. Say I become a huge video podcast star and interviewing with these people, and I sit down and I'm talking to them like, "Hey, I can maybe help get some of this media off your back." Da, 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 da. Not that I would, but something along those lines. I would hope that they would release the records of that. But if I sat down and had a personal conversation with them and saying, "Hey, you want to come over to my lake house? Just have a few beers, have a good time on the lake. No tit for tat, no quid pro quo, nothing. Just do you want to come hang out?" That should not, under any circumstance, be released to the public. Because my personal lake house, if I want it to be private and exclusively to me and my family and or my guests, why does the public need to know about it? Granted, they could go to a public records act and request who bought the property. I mean, that's not too difficult, but why do they need to get it from the legislature? Especially when it is a private situation. I can agree with that. But at the same time, there are certain instances where my correspondence with the legislatures should be allowed, and they can redact that information that is not pertinent to it, such as my personal contact information, where I live, et cetera, especially if the news media is going to release it. Because what if, say, I send an email to my representative, wherever I happen to be living at the time, and next thing I know, I have a virus that wipes out my computer and wipes out everything that I ever sent to that person. Well, obviously, the news media can't get anything from me. I wouldn't be able to prove that it was that legislature, that legislator, but one could suspect something like that. Not saying that any of our representatives would ever do that, but a worst case scenario situation, what what could happen? I got the chat window open, so if you guys want to hop in and chat, feel free. Um, but at the same time, that information should be sent back because honestly, legislators should not fear what we the people have to say and what we correspond to them. Unless they did something illegal and they're being blackmailed, at which point they should contact, Capitol Police and all that and take care of that. But if I send them, "Hey, I saw that you voted this way on this bill and I don't agree with it, so you can count out my vote and here's what I plan to do and I'm going to challenge you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." As long as there's no threats, no actual threats of violence or anything, there shouldn't be an issue. And what the heck just happened to my article? What the heck? Okay, time to refresh the page. All right. It was taking apparently so long for it to load all the ads that it lost track. All right. Because there are a ton of them. All righty, let's see here. Anyways. The bill is Alright, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen here, actually, now that I think about it. Okay. The bill, sponsored by Senators Sharon Nelson, Democrat of Murray Island, and Mark Schlesinger, Republican of Ritzville, also would have had retroactively blocked older legislative records, such as the ones being sought by the Media Coalition, including records of sexual harassment investigations and text messages between lawmakers. Again, as long as those text messages are about work, again, what they're actually doing as part of legislation or how they plan to vote, etc., that should be allowed. That should be definitely public discourse. But I should say released as a public record to allow public discourse. But any records of sexual harassment should be released once an investigation is done, completed, not ongoing, not, oh, hey, we just heard about this. We haven't even investigated it. Hold your horses. No. Yes, I understand that this is all sensational news and that it's going to be covered and you want to be the first one to break the story. I get that. That's what makes great reporters, especially investigative reporters. However, the information in an investigation, an ongoing investigation, needs to be kept close to the vest so that way you they can actually get the investigation done without anything that can impede it, anything that could cause it to go awry. In addition, the bill would have given the legislature authority over whether records were required to be disclosed. If a public records request were denied, an appeal would go to committees run by lawmakers and politically appointed staff, not to a court. I.e., if they say, no, we're not going to release that, and then you appeal it, and then it go back to basically, I won't say the same lawmakers, but, the same lawmakers, really, and their politically appointed staff, and they still say, no, because, we don't think you need to know this information because you could use it to damage us or do other things that could cause us harm. And that's it. That done. You don't get another appeal after that. Continuing on, many lawmakers hailed the legislation as a step forward in transparency since the legislature had previously been denying nearly all records. But open government advocates say blocking past records and exempting many others that are disclosed by nearly all other state and local governments represented an excuse me, represented an unprecedented blow to the flow of public information. Earl Hubbard has said that it was especially true since following court ruling that found the legislature was illegally withholding those records. In a letter to Inslee Thursday, Earl Hubbard welcomed the chance to convene a task force after lawmakers rushed to pass Senate Bill 6617. The bill got one public work session and nearly zero debate in the legislature. That is like this this equates to if the US House and Senate managed to rush through a bill overriding the Affordable Care Act under, let's say, President Hillary Clinton, in the first few months of office, with enough to override the veto, had she, vetoed it. She then vetoes it, but they decide to listen to their constituents, the people, and decide, oh, hey, let's maybe figure out a way we can do this bipartisanly. That's what this is like. I mean, seriously, how weird is it that they would do this, right? It is our belief that the public has the right to weigh in on any potential changes to public record laws before it is enacted, she said. The governor's veto came after a storm of criticism for Senate Bill 6617. Much came from the news organizations and open government groups. Newspapers, again, this should be newspapers, not newspaper. Newspapers across the state, including the News Tribune, ran front page editorials calling on Inslee to veto the bill. But Inslee's office also said it had received more than 6,300 phone calls, 100 letters, and more than 12,500 emails in the last week about Senate Bill 6617. Most contacting the office were opposed to the bill. The state lawmakers said that they had got similar backlash. I'm sure they did. I'm being one of them. I don't know how many of them actually watched this. It's a moot point at this point, but I hope they did. Quote, "We have heard loud and clear from our constituents that they are angry and frustrated with the process by which we passed the records bill," says the letter signed by House and Senate Democrats. A letter released by House Republicans chided the process by which Senate Bill 6617 passed and called Inslee's veto a good start. "We're covering our tracks. We don't want too much backlash. Let's back this up a bit." That's what you can read from that statement. All right. They also said that any future legislation on public records should keep sensitive information of constituents private. The legislature could clearly protect victims and witnesses, so our constituents may continue to hold the government accountable at all levels without fear of retaliation. Again, this is basically what I'm saying too. We need to go about this. I don't know, but we need to go about this and have them go about this in the sense of we will review requests, we will deny them, but we're not just going to give we denied this and that's it. It needs to be we denied this because this is an ongoing investigation of reason Z. As soon as reason Z is resolved, we will re-review it at that time to see if we can release the information. Now, once an investigation is done and it is going to the courts, as long as the judiciary does not say that the news media can't have this information, I'm totally okay with the legislature putting out that information, barring any personal information that doesn't need to be out there, such as addresses, contact information of witnesses, and the defendant and anybody else that's involved, victims. You know, and one of them should be also whistleblowers. Like I said, some public records exemptions do exist for sensitive information, such as for some whistleblower complaints. Many House and Senate Democrats also stood by some of the policy in the measure, saying in their letter that it had important transparency reforms. However, the letter says the hurried process had overshadowed the positive reforms in the bill. Okay. I think I'm going to pretty much. No, actually, I only have like a couple more paragraphs, so I might as well just finish the story. But I want to take a moment to pause on this and just. If you were so concerned as legislatures, as the legislature branch of our government, that there was an issue with our public records law, yes, you should definitely create a bill and pass it. But you should also give it the due process it deserves. You need to let the public weigh in on it, especially in something that pertains to us being able to hold our employees. That's right. You are our employees as our representatives accountable for your actions in office. I say the same thing about the federal government. I'm going to say the same thing about my local government. If I vote for you, actually, whether I vote for you or not is immaterial. If you are elected to office, you represent me and all my other neighbors, my community. If you are not going to represent my community faithfully, all you're going to represent is the corporations or the lobbyist groups, such as where I live currently in Washington is a big logging town. If you back Weyerhaeuser before you back your other constituents, we could have some problems if there's an issue between public land versus private land with Weyerhaeuser. If, just as an example, say there's a section of a forest that is previously owned by a person who passed away, the owners don't want to sell it to anybody else, but they want to donate it to the community to set up a new park for the community, for the kids and whatnot. That is what it should be used for. Not, oh hey, Weyerhaeuser hears about it and be like, hey, we could use the trees from this land. Let us buy it. We will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll cut it down, we'll replant. Their typical practices that they do now, which are pretty good, But at the same time, if it was the dying wish of the person or their family that they set up like a memorial park for somebody, that's what it should be used for. And if you, as a legislature, say, "Hey," Weyerhaeuser comes to you and says, "Hey, in your area, there's this piece of land that we would like to get. If we help promote you in the next election cycle, you think you could write a bill to get us that land?" Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That is what, if you agree to do something like that as my representative and I find out about it, woe be unto you because I will start protesting you. I will start supporting. I wouldn't even care if you were Democrat or Republican. I would start rallying to your opponent, especially if your opponent knows about this and is, going, their platform is against that. Anyways, long story short, you, the legislature, represent us, the people. Don't forget that. Yes, you do represent these corporations as well. I understand that. I'm not saying they don't have a part to play, but they should not be the majority. How shall I put it? The majority of your time in office kowtowing to them. It should be, you should be talking to us personally. And when I say personally, I mean, like town hall meetings, things like that, not necessarily one on one all the time. Which reminds me, I still got to send emails to my federal representatives. Anyways, long story short, we need to take the time that we have stopped this process now and go back to the drawing board. Again, I'm not saying that personal information of yourself or of the of any constituents or any witnesses, victims, or anything like that, anything that's in your personal life or professional job that could be considered like doxing of somebody. Don't want that. Bad stuff. But we should be able to get all the other information, and if it's in the middle of an investigation, I will agree to wait. I personally think that we should let the investigation go forward unhindered, unhampered. Yes, I'm going to want to know about it. And yes, I will want to know about it. And I know the news medias will want to get that information and be the one to scoop it. But we should not allow the media in its zealous process of making sure we get the facts. There should be a way of reining that in, and the news media should be understanding of that. There's an investigation, it has to be done a certain way, a certain pacing. So, sorry, just to finish off this article. Moving forward, Inslee called on the legislature to have a traditional process for passing any open government legislation that would clarify what information from the legislative branch should be public. That may ensure reforms won't crumble like it did in 2018. Since this bill passed, my office and lawmakers have heard an unprecedented level of response from the public, Inslee said. Those messages were heard loudly and clearly, and I now hope lawmakers, the media, and other stakeholders will work together to resolve the differences through a process the public can have faith in. And this was written by Walker Ornstein. So, again, like I said, what we are going for, what we are trying to go for with this is we need to, how do I want to put this? We need to hold our representatives accountable, but we don't need to know every little facet detail of their life while they hold office. You know, it's like the news media is trying to become the paparazzi, and I know they're going to hate me for that. But when all they do is report on sensationalized material, so and so has been involved in this scandal. Find out more at 5 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, at 6:30, at 10, at 11, etc. It's not, how to put it. It's not what I want the news to be. It's not what I want my legislatures to live in fear of. I better toe the line, otherwise they're going to, crucify me in the news media. There's a reason why we have trial by juries, trials in the court to allow people to be investigated and allow them to present their defense. But when we rule in the court of public opinion, you're always guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. Now the next thing, this is more of a law that's kind of passing through in Hawaii. You know, and I think it's definitely one that's gonna hit here home in Washington, but it can hit more around the country as well too. And that is loot boxes. If you don't play video games or if you're not familiar with them, basically loot boxes are prizes given to you in games. Now, Star Wars Battlefront 2 took a major media blow, a major hit for EA games because they basically charged you 60, $70 for a very basic game that you then had to buy either downloadable content or you have to progress so far to get a loot box to be able to get more, etc., etc., etc. So basically, you're having to do all these little microtransactions to get a loot box, and you could end up spending easily in a day $300 or $400. Now, some of the opponents of these loot boxes are saying that it is targeted specifically at children. As a video game player, although I haven't been doing it as much lately as I would like to, what with school and work and trying to get into a regular flow on this, I don't see that as what their intent was, the intention of them creating these loot boxes. Loot boxes are meant for the more serious gamer that knows when to step away from the game, or the more serious gamer that streams and plays their game like on Twitch or here on YouTube. Twitch.tv. Yeah, Twitch.tv if you want to check out what Twitch is. But the thing is, they are kind of like gambling. And I know here in Washington State, we have an anti-online gambling game because that's where most of these loot boxes come from. Online portions of games. So, in Hawaii, they have passed a they have passed, or not passed, but they are having legislation created to work out the legality of loot boxes and how to, um, how do on how they want to allow people to do it, but maybe still make it kind of illegal. Now, some of the earlier iterations of what people have been calling for is, um, basically making it illegal, period. Because in some states it is illegal to gamble, if not at a specific casino or via state lottery. Like, just as an example here, I want to play in, like, fantasy football leagues like DraftKings and the like, and win money. I think I could do decently at it. I'm not the best, but I'm sure I could make some money doing it. But I can't here in Washington. I'd have to move to another state to be able to do that. Sucks to be me. As long as I want to live in Washington, I cannot do that. Now, the the loop well, some of the things that they're thinking about doing it, and not specifically in Hawaii, but just in general, some of the things we're hearing about are the states are not only going to prosecute game developers, but the people who actually buy and pay to get loot boxes without having to play the game up to certain points. Um, and actually, I got a pretty decent, I think, good example of this. I don't know if it's true, but if you've heard of the games Gardenscape or Homescape, you'll know that every day, once you let's see here. All right, come on. Every day you get awarded a daily prize. One of those prizes might be a power up, might be coins to be able to extend your levels, etc. Now, in order to do that, I just play the game, and every day I get a new one, and it's just a random lottery, whatever the theme of the week is. Sometimes it's the gold disc, it's the multicolored disco ball. Some of it's airplanes, because I only play homescapes now. But as an example, though, I could come on, you. No, that's not what I told you to do. Come on, there we go. But as an example, I could also pay to get a loot box or I could pay to get these extra power ups. Well, in order to pay, I have to have coins or I have to use real money. Some of the other legislation has to do with some of the other legislation that they discuss, and I'll have the link in the description below, um, to the extra credits video, and I think it's worth a watch as well as their previous video on it as well. You should definitely watch both. Um, but I think that one, I'm sure that one of the ways that they're talking about doing this is maybe to correct this is maybe instead of, putting people in jail, instead of considering it gambling, maybe be like, hey, you've already spent, $50 on loot boxes this week. Don't you think you've spent enough? You're putting up little reminders because it's easy for people to spend hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars on these games to buy power ups, to buy random items for different experiences. It can go back to Star Wars, different guns, different weapons, different power ups for those characters that you're playing, such as an Imperial stormtrooper, an Imperial pilot, ARC troopers, things like that. Just in general, when you buy a loot crate, it basically randomly gives you X number of discs. I think that's what they're called. I haven't played Battlefront 2 in months. It's crazy. But again, what we need to do is, like Hawaii's doing, settle it on a state by state basis. Now, yes, it's going to make it harder for game developers, but if we can settle it on a state by state basis on how that they want to do it, we can then go to a national level and be like, look, this is how the states have organized themselves into how they're going to treat these loot boxes. Now let's see if we can find a common ground and make it easier for the developers to develop one game that can meet all of these state laws. Or maybe we can convince some of these other states that are being a little hardlined on it to back off and allow loot boxes with these, how to put it, with these caveats, such as, again, hey, you've bought 3 loot boxes this week, and each one was $10. You should probably hold off, and give it a couple weeks. You know, incentivize playing the game to earn the experience rather than going and buying the crates. Yes, have the crates there for some cool gear, but not the most powerful or not the most awesome gear available. Um, it's just my opinion. As a gamer, I would much rather I would much rather play the game and experience it, and I would much rather have a single player offline version of a game that I can play through with a good story mode that would have the ability for me to gain all of these things, and I can then move on. And if I have a hard time with a boss or something, I can then go into the online co-op and maybe have some people help me, and then we can all benefit from it. I'm not a video game expert. I wish I was, but I'm not. That is something that we can have for, that's what we have shows like Extra Credits for. Really great channel, and I really suggest that if you are even remotely interested in legislation about video games, to check them out. They have a lot of great ideas, and they are all people that have worked in the industry. They know the industry. One of the people that is part of the Extra Credits team, James Portnow, lives, as far as I know, he still lives here in the Seattle area, and he is an instructor at DigiPen, or at least he was the last I read. This this allow his passion for video games, and he's actually shared his personal struggles with you know video games and stuff, and how it's affected his life on Extra Credits. Again, just totally go check out their channel, Extra Credits, on YouTube. Um, I, I might see if I can edit the link to their actual website. Excuse me. So much all the time here, but excuse me. Um, I feel that we should be able to allow. We've got to be able to work together on legislation, both on a local level and a national level. Local, state levels, like local communities, we have our little ordinances, such as curfews for the teenagers and children, to how loud your music can be played at certain hours, to you know all that stuff. And not every municipality is the same. Fine. Then states can go on and maybe make something similar to, hey, such as with driving here in the state of Washington. If you are 16-year-old and you have a license, you cannot drive with anybody in the car except for family members. Last I heard, it's been a while since I've reviewed it, but just going off of that principle, that means you can only drive with like siblings or adults in the car. Fine, great, no big deal. Um, but then we can maybe other states can see how that program works for us, and then they could implement it, and we could maybe make a national, not so much law, but like a national training that says, hey, you're still not quite good enough drivers, even though you got your license, you passed it, but it's now time to think about you know upping your game and practicing with more people in the car, things like that. Anyways, kind of tangented off there, but with loot crates, that's the way we kind of need to go. We need to have our states figure out what's going to work best for them and what's going to work best for the developers. Each state, and I cannot stress this enough, each state needs to contact if not all the little developers, but the major, and not just the AAA or the major developers like Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft and EA and all that. No, no. We got to get also to some of the mid-range people as well and be like, we want your input. This is what we're planning on. We're planning on saying loot crates are only available to those that are 21 and over. Well, that limits the market because what if this is a game that's geared towards, you know, 16, 17, 18, 19 year olds? They're not old enough to buy, even though they might be old enough to buy a game, such as an M for mature. I believe that's a 17 rating. We'll go take a look at that here really quick. Uh, Here we go. Video game rating system. ESRB. That's what I was looking for. So M is 17. So if they made a game such as Grand Theft Auto 2020 for the year 2020, and it's rated mature for 17, but it has some loot boxes in it for special paint jobs or special cars, things like that. If a state made it, no, you have to be 21 to be able to get the loot box or buy a game that has loot boxes in it, that cuts a good segment of people out of their market, especially, you know, college students, the ones who are usually targeted at these games. The industry leaders, the publishers, the um, the companies in general, like Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, they could come in and say, "Well, yeah, but we also have all these other developers that aren't here, and we got to represent their interest." And this would put those these would put those developers out of business. Oh, we didn't think about that. So that means more people on the street that can't work because Nintendo and Microsoft aren't going to hire a whole bunch of people to develop games when developers could be stifled by the requirements of a new system. And again, that's another story for another time, and extra credits covers it very well. But we have to trying to think of what I'm trying to say. Been a long day. But basically what we have to do is just get together with the industry leaders, with our local state government legislatures, and figure out how to make these loot boxes available to people, but also cap them in a way that isn't allowed for children to abuse getting them. Maybe set, a purchase limit of X number of loot boxes per week, and that is it. Hard and fast. There's no way to get around it. In order to get another piece of gear, you actually have to go on Level Up and actually play the game. I don't see a problem with that. I don't know about the people at Extra Credit, Dan and James and all of them. I think, after watching the video, I kind of think that might be a good way that they would lean, but again, it just depends on what what the other people think, what the actual industry leaders think, what the actual developers think, what lawmakers think. So that's it for this week in politics. I'm trying to keep the show under an hour, and I'm trying to keep it to 1 to 2 topics, depending on the relevancy of the topics. Now, I am picking things that are a little more closer to home for me, but I am willing to discuss topics that people send to me. Again, you can reach me directly at jpoliticspodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach me at jpolipodcast, that's POLI podcast, on Twitter. I'm trying to do this towards the end of the week, depending on what my work schedule looks like. It could be something that could be either done late Friday if I have the day off Friday, or it could be something that is done early Saturday morning if I work Saturday and I'm closing, or if I'm opening Saturday like I did today, I would do it later in the evening. I'm not going to be able to have a set time. Not with the way my schedule is right now, working a retail job and going to school. However, I am trying to keep it at least live on Saturday, audio hopefully up Saturday night, if not Sunday time frame. I just hope that you guys will spread the word of mouth that I am doing this, and I hope that you will allow my subscribership to grow, and that you'll check us out on the podcast 99 Internet Radio. I totally just forgot that we actually have a site that has our internet radio on it. I'm actually going to go pull that up really quick. All right. So I'm actually going to put a link to this in my description down below, so you can check us out anytime you want by listening to us here. It's Podcast 99 Internet Radio, and you can listen to Dave Bowman. You can listen to myself, the Ale Evangelist Show, um, a whole list of other shows, such as Pat the Lawyer and Chat Room Jeff. Just looking at the list here, matter of fact, I'm going to go share my screen again. This is how important I think that this is. Um, we do this because we want to do this. We do these shows because we have fun doing them. It's a lot of work for us. I have to take time away from my family to do this. I've got to try and plan this around my work schedule, around my school schedule, and spending time with my wife, and family. So, as you can see here, it's listen.samcloud.com, and I will put the full link on there. Come check us out. We have a lot of shows, and we are trying to grow the network as well. We can't grow unless you, the subscribers, unless you, the listeners, share and promote us. We can promote ourselves all we want, but until you guys start promoting us as well, we can't grow much further than what we already are. And I'm not trying to sound like a pitch man here, but that's kind of my job on doing this. So I'm just asking, if you get a chance to, you're listening to one of our shows and somebody overhears it and they ask, hey, where can I find this? Send them to podcast99.org. Send them this link. Send them to Plausibly Live, the DaveBowmanShow.com. Sorry. We love doing this. I mean, I've upgraded my microphones. I've upgraded a lot of stuff. I'm eventually at some point going to be upgrading my computer from a laptop to an actual desktop at some point. But again, we enjoy doing this for you, and we want to keep doing it, and we want to keep growing as well. We want to reach as many people as we can, not just for the politics side of things. I love my football stuff as well. I'll be doing another one next week, probably on one of my days off next week. I don't even know what those are yet. And I'm going to start throwing those in here on the Podcast 99 network as well. I want to start sending Dave the audio of that, and I'm also going to be giving the links to that as well. So, we're just asking that you help support us in a way that doesn't cost money. It's just word of mouth. That's all we're asking. We're going to be start sending out tweets, you know, for our stuff. We'll send it out. Follow us, pass it on Facebook. Really simple thing to do. Go to well, let's go to that now. Now that I'm doing Facebook. Podcast. And come on. I'm trying to do a quick search on here. Yeah, so the Podcast 99 network page. And when you're on there, and actually, I'm going to do this really quick as well. I'm going to share my screen yet again. Come on, you. Applications. So, got the Podcast 99 network right here. While you're here, the way that the following is see how I have it set to default for doing this actually. If you leave it set to this default setting, it is not going to show up every single post that there is onto your newsfeed all the time. You want to select the see it first. That way it hits your timeline. Next time you see it, we've posted a show in here. Post the links to it. You can then share it to your friends and so on and so forth. And they can come back and make sure that they set it up this way as well. Anyways, I'm rambling yet again, as always. I just want to thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been another Jay's Politics podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Radio Network. And this was episode 3 of This Week in Politics, This Week in U.S. Politics. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you found the information decent. I hope you found my opinion of the information decent. Again, I'm not going to try and preach every week. I'm going to try and present more centrist stuff, but sometimes on a topic such as public records, I am going to give you my opinion on something like loot crates. That's one of those gray areas. We can go either way, and we just need to figure out which way is the best way for us as a society. Is it addicting and gambling those loot boxes, or is it just harmless fun? And I think it's somewhere in the middle. Alrighty. This has been Jay for Jay's Politics Podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. Have a wonderful day. You can reach me at jpoliticspodcast at gmail.com or at jpolipodcast on Twitter. And again, that's JPOLIPODCAST on Twitter. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Enjoy your Sunday. And I will see you next week with another This Week in U.S. Politics.